What is up, everybody? This is Andrew with American Marijuana, and this is my weekly or semi-weekly vlog series where I track my progress as I enter the cannabis business. Lessons learned, experiences. I think it might be helpful for other people starting a cannabis business to see the difficulties and the easy parts. So that's what this vlog series is all about. This week, I did think about the company structure, and I've decided that this will be best structured as a holding company, where the holding company is also a brand itself. So an example would be, actually I can't think of a good example right now. It would be like Procter and Gamble, if Procter and Gamble were also a brand. I guess RGR Reynolds, I guess they used to make tobacco. Maybe it's a bad analogy, but basically there'll be a master company that is also a cannabis brand, and then there'll be sub-brands. And the sub-brands will be little brands that I start, maybe regional brands, maybe national brands, maybe big brands. I wouldn't be surprised if one of the sub-brands became bigger than the parent brand. So I'm going to start a couple smaller brands, and then there might also be acquisitions where a company's going out of business or something like that, and I buy them, and then I'll put them under the master brand. So that's sort of the theory of the structure that I was thinking about. The other progress that I made was I reached out to my first dispensary. I didn't reach out. I went into the dispensary, and it was really interesting because it was the smallest dispensary I've ever seen. It was about 200 square feet if you count the lobby and the showroom. The showroom was probably about 50 square feet. I mean, just enough room for two people, two customers, and two salespeople, and a really small counter. They didn't have a lot of product. They didn't have a lot of selection, but what they did have were a large number of small brands, or not a large number. They had a large percentage of small brands, which meant they didn't have Stizzy, they didn't have Kingpen, they didn't have any of the big cart makers like Marley Naturals, or the big brands that you would see at most dispensaries in big cities. They didn't seem to have any of them. And what was really interesting is I had never been in a dispensary that small or that unique, and I'm starting to see that the difference between dispensaries is great. For example, if you go into MedMen, you'll see a lot of bigger brands like Island and I'm trying to think of some other ones that I saw there. Basically the big brands that are doing the biggest volume. Whereas if you go into these small ones, there are brands that I hadn't even heard of, and they had 5 different varieties of flower from this brand. So I think it's going to be very challenging to get product on shelves of a lot of different dispensaries. I asked them, I said, how do you get product on your shelves? And they said, well, just keep coming back. You can send us an email. I was like, okay. And that's when I realized that the ownership and management staff may not be on site all the time, or even on site most of the time. And they're the ones who are making the buying decisions, or if they have a buyer, they're not going to be on site, behind a counter necessarily, especially for the bigger companies. But for a small dispensary like this, I was really expecting to get a little bit closer to speaking to a buyer, but it didn't work out that way. What else? I guess it opened my eyes to the challenges of distribution. And by distribution, I don't mean distribution. I mean the difficulty of building relationships and building a supply chain. The difficulty of building those relationships with dispensaries so that you can have your product on a number of shelves. It's going to take a lot of resources to have salespeople go out to all these small dispensaries and build a relationship with them before they will stock our product. And I can see why the bigger brands focus on companies like Harborside and MedMen, where they're doing so much volume that if you just have a relationship with a single company, you can be cash flow positive. But the question is, do you go the mass market route, or do you do the organic thing and have hire local salespeople who are good at building those relationships with the smaller dispensaries? And I think organic is the way to go, whether it's growing wheat, growing weed, or building relationships with customers or with dispensaries with your retail sales channel. It's always better if you have a really deep and knowledgeable relationship of the people you're working with. So I think that's the way to go. I just don't know how I'm going to fund that initially. Maybe I thought it was going to be me driving around all the different dispensaries and being like, hey, here I am, here's my weed, don't you want to buy it? All right, so some other industry thoughts that I've had over the last week are, well, it wasn't my thoughts. I was watching a YouTube video where one of the presenters was talking about the eventuality of large-scale destruction of the current market as we know it, whether it's dispensaries, testing labs, growers, all of these people. There's going to be, when there's federal rollback of prohibition, a lot of people believe that there's going to be extreme pressure on the smaller, local, regional companies because they can't compete on a national level. I think one of the big things that's going to make a difference is whether or not dispensaries deliver. That will allow them to expand their footprint, and they can focus on their inventory and focus on the relationships with customers and the marketing, as opposed to the national brands, which are going to just focus on large-scale marketing like TV ads kind of a thing. Although I'm not saying TV ads are going to be legalized. I'm saying that's an example of something a national brand might do. Another thing that might kill a large number of companies, especially dispensaries, is the coming changes in taxation and regulation. If you look at the way California is regulating cannabis about every 6 months, there are some big changes on the policy side, on the laws that they pass that govern how dispensaries and everyone else in the industry can operate. And so when you look at how quickly things are changing, and if you look at how they're taxing dispensaries right now, I think that governments see dispensaries as the head of the snake. And they're just trying to tax it and do as much as they can to the head of that snake to tamper down that competition that alcohol and tobacco companies are seeing. And I think that's going to continue. I think taxes are going to be raised. I think there's going to be more regulation and more encumbrances put upon people in the industry. It's one of the risks that these early operators are taking, but I think with risk comes large reward, huge reward, and I think that the early movers in the space are going to do very well. Another thing that could change are customer habits. So if there were a national player, whether it's Amazon or just a national cannabis marketplace that was able to dramatically lower prices and increase marketing by using the economies of scale, I think that that's going to put a lot of pressure on local companies, especially the smaller dispensaries. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens, and I don't think that anyone's going to be skating by over the next couple of years. And once there's federal rollback of prohibition, I think that everything's going to get a little bit crazy. But there's going to be opportunities there for the larger companies that are cash flow positive or might have big investors or big bank accounts to do those acquisitions and to build up their company through buying other companies. So those are all the thoughts I had for today. I hope you guys have a great week, and I'll be back in a couple days, hopefully Friday, with an update.